Welcome, everyone, to Beyond the Brandywine,
where we wander, and occasionally get lost in Middle-earth. I'm Angela.
And I'm Kelsey. Beyond the Brandywine is a cozy, curious, and occasionally chaotic journey through the stories of Middle-earth.
Join us as we laugh over the odd bits of lore and follow tangents like hobbits chasing second breakfast. We're here to explore the places where the map fades and the questions get weird.
So, Angela, you like dragons, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're cool, I guess.
And you obviously like Tolkien.
Whatever would make you think that, Kelsey?
I have no idea. Maybe this podcast. Okay, so what if I told you the most important dragon in Middle-earth never appears in The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings?
Well, until recently, I would have been very surprised. Because as I say in almost every episode we do, until I started researching for this week's episode, I couldn't have named any dragon other than Smaug. Smaug.
Well, except for that one time I mentioned Ancalagon in a previous episode. But yes, right? I think we all know about the dragon Smaug. He's witty, he's terrifying, he plays this amazing game of like cat and mouse with Bilbo and the dragon horde in the story of The Hobbit. And Benedict Cumberbatch voiced him impeccably in the movies. Yeah. But there's another dragon, the very, very first dragon, who makes, frankly, Smaug look like a pet lizard.
We're going back to the first age, aren't we?
You know it. But before we get into the details of this super important first dragon and time travel back to the first age, I actually think some background on how dragons came about in Tolkien's universe would be interesting and useful for our listeners.
Yeah, this is actually a really interesting point because there's debate on how exactly the dragons first appear and how. There's all kinds of different theories by the Tolkien scholars based on what Tolkien actually wrote. How are the dragons created? Were they bred? How they were brought into being by Morgoth during the first age.
Good old Morgoth. Although I think I was reading a similar quote where it was like created, bred, or brought into being. And I feel like those three words are doing a lot of work in that sentence because those are going very different directions.
There's definitely a lot of debate. They were definitely created by Morgoth, but we know that Morgoth couldn't create sentient life. Like he could only corrupt existing life.
Kind of like the orcs, right? So he has the ability to take something and warp it into something much more awful or evil and terrifying, but he can't just make orcs from scratch.
Yeah, like we know from Tolkien. And granted, Tolkien he kind of goes back and forth on this, I think, a little bit, but we know that the orcs were twisted from elves.
Yes.
And like Treebeard, the trolls were twisted from Ents.
Yes. I was like, Ents were twisted from anything.
No. You're right. The Ents are pure. The trolls were twisted versions of Ents.
Yes.
Which Treebeard himself says, I think, in The Two Towers. One of the theories is that the dragons are corrupted from the eagles.
The eagles?
Yeah, and I guess that's a theory, and one of the reasons against that theory is that not all the dragons have wings, which we'll talk about.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, they can't all fly. And also, I feel like this is a bit of an aside, but the eagles are Manway's thing.
Right.
So I get that Morgoth wanting to corrupt them would be a giant middle finger to Manway and Eru, but I also feel like they're so important in so much of the text that there's something that like he would not be allowed to touch or corrupt in any way.
Okay. Yeah, because that's another theory is that are they corrupted Maiar, which I think are the eagles Maiar? Do you know?
No,
they're not?
They're just creatures.
Oh, they're just creatures.
That's what I'm saying. They're not as powerful as the Maiar who turned into Balrogs.
Yeah, so like the Balrogs are corrupted Maiar. So I guess one of the theories is that dragons are also.
Interesting.
But again, none of this is really supported by any actual evidence. They're just theories.
Well, you had touched on, in our episode on the spookiest places in Middle-earth, I specifically remember us talking about the unnamed things and the dark places of the world, and you brought up these giant worms. And we had talked about, is that something that Morgoth could have turned into the dragons and warped? Because you have kind of a warm lizard-like shape that then you can just do what you will, right?
Right. So this could turn into a tangent, but also I do want to talk about this in an actual episode of some of those nameless things that are actually mentioned in the books. Like those worms that I mentioned, they're in The Hobbit and they just come out of the mountains as like these, it's almost like they tunnel through the rocks and are eating the rocks. But they're not described as dragons, even though some of these dragons are called worms. So there's definitely there could be some debate there on whether they are actually the same thing. But these worms in The Hobbit are not called dragons.
So from Tolkien's text, what do we know? We know that Morgoth made or created them. So it definitely came from Morgoth. They're not
They
like
came from
coming
Morgoth for sure.
Sauron or other people. Like nobody else is making dragons, right?
Right. They 100% were created in some way from Morgoth.
Okay. We just don't know. Was he working from scratch? Was he taking something else? Was he getting Meyer to like sign up for the cause and turn into permanent form like they did with Balrogs?
Right.
Huh.
Definitely up for debate. All these dragons do have their own personalities. Whether they're actually sentient, though, is, I think, also up for debate. Like, do they have souls or do they just... It kind of seems like they do because they're all... They have
Morgoth's
personalities.
not allowed to make things with souls.
I know. So that's where it's questioned if they actually... Like, they have personalities, but are they actually souls?
Yeah.
And I will say one final thing is that in the books, Glaurung, one of the dragons we're about to talk about.
Yeah. The OG dragon.
The OG dragon is said to talk with the voice of Morgoth himself.
Is he almost like, this is going to get into like weird magic RPG, Dungeons and Dragons stuff, but you know how you can create a familiar animal or something that's like somehow connected to you?
Yeah, so it's kind of like, did Morgoth actually put some of his own self into this dragon? And I think it's Christopher Lee that narrates The Children of Horn, correct? I think it's Christopher Lee. He changes his, like when he's voicing Glaurung, he changes to his Morgoth voice. I think even the text itself, I don't have the quote, unfortunately, but Glaurung is said to speak with the voice of Morgoth. And so it's basically the theory is that Morgoth is somehow actually like the soul, not just...
Is he like channeling himself through the dragon?
Possibly.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I was thinking of, is it like a ring or to use Harry Potter terminology, a Horcrux where he puts like a little bit of himself into it? Is it just a hollow magical shell of a creature that he transmits himself through? Has he, almost like Frankenstein's monster, created it to act in his image without it being fully independent, but maybe it's independent? There's a lot of ways
I think these are all still valid because there's just not enough to go off of.
We don't know how Morgoth made them, is the TLDR here, right?
Yeah. So these are all theories that are talked about. None of them are really provable besides the fact that we know they were created by Morgoth. But we also know that Morgoth cannot create sentient life. So there's kind of we don't really know.
I was just looking up a quote from the Silmarillion, actually, and it's in chapter 18 where it's describing Morgoth growing all of his hosts, and it talks about Morgoth breeding the race of orcs in mockery of the elves and made them in his fashion, and then and then it says, there he, Morgoth, there he also devised the race of dragons, and in later days many of them he sent forth to wreak havoc on the world. So again, a lot of interpretation here, but I see the word devised as in he came up with. Like he devised this. Like dragons didn't exist. It sounds like dragons didn't exist until Morgoth did something. And
yeah, where did they...
It devised to me as like planning or designing. So he's... Again, we don't know what his base...
What's his base
material is. Is it an unnamed worm? Is it a Meyer who's like, I volunteer? And he's like, I've got this great idea. The form you can turn
You're
into.
going to be a dragon.
Yeah, you're going to be a dragon man. Or is it just he really truly made them and then with his own dark magic kind of gave them some sort of life? I don't know.
All good questions.
We don't know. Tolkien does not answer this, it sounds like, which...
No,
gosh,
he doesn't.
Maybe they're in his lost notes somewhere on dragons.
We needed Tolkien to just live longer because it's clear from a lot of this that he was in process. And thank goodness for his son that was able to put some of this together.
Christopher is our Lord and Savior, Christopher.
Yeah.
We're sorting through all of his notes.
He has so much background and he was changing things as he went along. So the dragons may not have been fully thought out as far as where they...
Well, and they're very interesting in the sense that they have some very, very important plot beats in Tolkien's works, but they're not all over the texts.
Right.
They're like in little fits and spurts and some stories, and the most crazy ones, which we'll get to, are all pretty much in the Silmarillion in the First Age. Like I said, everybody knows Smaug the Magnificent from The Hobbit, but even he, like in the grand scheme of the plot,
kind of a baby.
He's a baby.
Yeah.
He's a teeny tiny shadow of a former dragon, so he's not anywhere near the power or the scariness, frankly, of the original dragons, like Morgoth's version 1.0 and 1.2 dragons.
I can just reiterate that I do not want to live in the First Age.
We are very certain at this point in time that is not a place we ever want to be.
Shall we fully discuss the first dragon?
The first dragon.
Father of dragons, if you will.
Father of dragons, the deceiver, the worm of Morgoth. Like, he's got so many cool titles.
Yeah.
And his name was
Glaurung.
You say that so nicely.
Glaurung.
It's not a flap. Glaurung. Yeah, right? Do like death metal, like Glaurung, father of dragons. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he would definitely have a rock,
my
metal
brother's a
entrance.
huge death metal fan, so I feel like he would appreciate that. But yeah, he is the original dragon.
The OG father of dragons, which implies that there was a mother, but we don't know.
We don't need to get into how dragons are produced.
So when a father dragon and a mommy dragon
love each other very much. I don't think there's any love in Angband or Utumno. So I think, because we know how the orcs are created, right? They're just twisted with magic, but they're already a species, and dragons don't seem like.
But it seems like they do breed.
Do we know that?
Actually, no.
We don't. We don't have any textual evidence of that.
That's true. Yeah, anyway.
If they could, why is their species failing in the Third Age?
Is it, though?
Well, but first, Glaurung. He's the OG. I love his story. I love that he's kind of, for any of our technology or software fans out there, he was almost like released in beta version.
Yes.
And it didn't work out, and then Morgoth had to make some tweaks before he sent him out again.
Angsty teenage dragon.
He was.
That defied his dad.
Well, what do we know about him? Like, in terms of descriptions?
Wings.
Oh, he doesn't fly.
He does not fly.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he has no wings, but he does spit fire.
Okay, well, that's very dragony of him. That's bad news.
Yes, he's definitely a dragon in the fire regard.
Mm-hmm. And he comes about in the First Age pretty early, right?
It is pretty early in the First Age. The elves are battling Morgoth and Angband for like 400 years, by the way.
It's a
long time.
It's a long siege. Well,
so yeah, they're battling for 400 years when the dragon first comes out.
Yeah, there's the early First Age Noldor elves doing a huge siege. Things are like going okay for the elves.
Yeah.
Morgoth doesn't quite know what to do. He releases his software release of Glaurung was early, and the elves and the archers and stuff are actually able to defeat him enough that he basically retreats back into the fortress. And
that's right.
Like, he's not killed, but it tells us that if archers can get to him, because you think
he was beatable.
Yeah, you think of dragons, right? Smaug is famous later in The Hobbit because his hide is impenetrable. It's a very important plot point that arrows cannot go through his scales. And he's like a little wimpy, tiny dragon. Mm-hmm. So Glaurung, the OG dragon, is able to get injured at least by elven archers in the First Age before he's like fully grown.
So he has to retreat.
But do we know, did he go out on his own accord or did Morgoth send him out?
No, so this is the funny part, is that he went out on his own, and Morgoth was pretty pissed at him when he gets back. Like, when he retreats, he's like, "You are not supposed to go out yet."
So basically, it's like an angsty teenage dragon that gets put in timeout for
200 years.
That's a long time.
I know,
and it gives him time to fully grow and become truly terrifying. But I think it's funny that he was like, "So let me put me in coach. Put me in coach. I want to go fight the elves," and ignores Daddy Morgoth's directions there. And I guess it does matter too if he can't fly.
Yeah, he's kind of vulnerable.
Tactically, you're not going to be able to go up in the air to avoid things.
Right.
Interesting. And then, after his 200-year timeout, he comes out again at the dagger Bragalach. I'll look up the... sounds like Scottish Bragalach.
I'll let you pronounce that one.
And it is horrific for the elves. I feel like he's learned his lesson and Morgoth's thought about
it. He's had 200 years to be angry at having to stay indoors.
He's finally come into his final form, if you will.
Yeah.
This is the one I like. So a couple years later, elves are still fighting Morgoth, as they do in the First Age.
Yeah.
And in the Nirnaeth Arnoiniad, which is the Battle of Unnumbered Tears.
Right.
Spoiler alert, does not go well for the elves or the dwarves or anything. Glaurung was released and is just a menace, like spewing fire, wrecking elves. This is one of the worst battles, the First Age elves. Like, they're lucky any of them came out of it alive.
Right. I mean, Battle of Unnumbered Tears kind of gives you that hint. But yeah, they're like decimated.
Completely.
This is one of the battles where I'm like, how did they even have anybody to fight with after this?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the reasons they had anybody was the dwarves.
Yes.
This is, oh man. So for those of you who know that elves and dwarves in later ages don't really get along, it might break your hearts to find out that essentially in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, elves and dwarves were actually getting along, and it's the dwarves, specifically the dwarves of Belagost, known as the Nalgrim, that saved the elves from completely being wiped out in this battle. which is a huge
Yeah.
thing to do considering how they get along later. And I have some quotes because I love it, because essentially there's this visual of this crazy dwarven warrior who's like very ballsy and actually gets a hit on Glaurung in the middle of the battle. He like gets under him and like, drives his dwarven spear up, but he's killed in the process. And essentially that fires up the dwarves and they form this epic shield wall around their fallen comrade. And it says, but the Naugrim made a circle about him when he fell, and the dragons could not pierce it. And then they bear away their colleague from the battlefield. But the really striking description from this fight is these dwarves of Belagost have like really special armor, and dwarves are apparently inherently, at least these dwarves, a little resistant to dragon fire. And it says they were unmoved by the fire and in the tempest of the dragons. So like it's not just Glaurung that was released. There were other dragons that came out.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, but for the dwarves of Belagost, the elves of the Noldor would have perished at that day.
Yeah.
The dwarves are the reason the elves make it any further in the rest of the first age.
I'm like, there must have been other things that happened to make that relationship so strained, but
a lot of things
they should have
happened.
gotten some credit, more credit.
But it's insane, right? You have this like host of dwarves with these special helmets and whatever, and they're just sitting there taking the dragon fire and not being hurt. Like that is an image. I love it.
I'd love to see that. But yeah, that's not even the end of Glaurung.
But wait, it gets worse.
There's more. So
basically there's ancient elven city that's hidden away, Nargothrond. And spoiler alert, like we talked about a lot of the elven cities in the first age, it also gets wrecked. It gets discovered and wrecked and destroyed by Morgoth's forces. And it is Glaurung that's basically chief leading the assault against Nargothrond.
He pretty much helps sack Nargothrond.
Yeah, he's wrecked it. He's taken over. It's his dragon horde. He lays over the conquered city, and it turns into his little place.
And this is the part in Nargothrond, and what happens in a second that we'll explain, that really made me realize Glaurung is evil. Evil.
He's not just malevolent and a big bad you have to fight in battle. Like, he has a personality, and unlike some of the other dragons we see in Tolkien's works, like he can speak. He has either the magic of Morgoth or like some elements of manipulation. He is a terrifying creature that not only will wreck you physically, but wreck you psychologically.
Yeah. So, he has the fire. He doesn't have the wings, but he can use essentially mind control.
Yeah.
And enslave people, make them go mad, and as we'll see, kill themselves.
Well, yeah. Don't make eye contact with Glaurung, I think is the takeaway here.
Yeah. So, and we don't have to go into all the background, but the man Turin.
Yes. Human man.
He basically comes to Nargothrond. I forget the background of how he goes there, but he decides to gaze right into the eyes of Glaurung.
He ignores all the advice and
don't recommend.
Accidentally makes eye contact with the worst dragon in existence.
Yeah. And so he was halted moveless. And for a long time, he stood as one graven of stone, and they too were alone, silent before the doors of Nargothrond.
Oh, man.
And Glaurung basically speaks to Turin and taunts him and says all kinds of things to Turin and makes him feel, I don't know how much is actually true, but he calls them things like slayer of thy friend, thief of love.
Gets under his skin.
Getting under his skin really bad.
Psychological damage plus 20.
Yeah. I guess he's under a spell for a while.
By Turin making eye contact with him, he hooks him with his first conversation. There's a quote where basically, then Glaurung issued forth from the gates of Nargothrond and lay behind between Turin and the bridge. And then suddenly he spoke by the evil spirit that was in him, saying, "Hail, son of Hurin, well met." And it's like he's got him from, as soon as he starts talking to him, he's got his magical claws on him, if you will.
And from what I remember is that Turin eventually, Glaurung stops speaking, kind of wakes Turin up from being under the spell, and kind of gives Turin a choice of, you can go, I forget where his mom and sister are, but it's Morwen and Nienor, his mother and sister.
Yeah.
And he's like, you can go save them, or you can save the mother city. And
you get one choice.
Yeah.
Neither of them are good.
Right. And it's part of the taunting that Glaurung is doing. And so Turin does decide to go save his mother and sister, but what the dragon did not tell Turin is that his mother and sister are not at the city that he sends him to. They're actually safe in a different city. And so Turin just goes off on this foolhardy errand.
He sets him up for failure. He basically messes with his mind, puts a spell on him, increases the curse that's already on Turin and his family, if you will. Because we're skipping over the fact that Turin's dad was cursed by Morgoth.
Yeah, there's already a curse.
The dragon part is just like making everything worse for the family. But essentially, Turin is doomed by the stuff that Glaurung the dragon plants in his head.
Yeah.
Like he didn't have a good chance with the curse of Morgoth upon him and his family. But once Glaurung sets him up and puts this spell over him and says
he's making all kinds of bad choices.
The dragon is very careful because he uses like these half-truths and stuff. And I think that's how he also convinces him about his mom and sister, right?
Yeah. It's enough half-truths where he's like, oh my God, gotta go over here. But it's all wrong. But then Glaurung actually puts a spell over his sister, Nienor, where Nienor forgets who she is and couldn't remember any of her life, not even her own name. And so she ends up, she actually meets Turin again. They end up getting married.
Yeah. And it's a big deal for him because I think in that choice that Glaurung originally gives him, he basically says you can save your love or you can save your mother and sister. And he goes for his mother and sister who aren't even there, and his lady love at the time dies because he doesn't rescue her. So he's wrecked because his first love is dead. And then after he goes through all this, he meets this other woman, which in a very George R.R. Martin style is his sister.
Is his sister,
but she doesn't know it and he doesn't know it, and it's super weird.
And they do get married.
Yeah.
And then
basically Glaurung is playing the long game here. Like he's setting up Turin to
time
have,
passes.
The most awful. But like
he's
the
just
fact
letting
that
simmer.
Targets this guy specifically and is like, I'm going to mess up your life. It's just so evil.
But they do eventually meet Glaurung again. And Turin he kind of comes up from below and stabs Glaurung. And as Glaurung is dying, basically tells Turin the truth.
And it's funny because I think there's an opportunity earlier in the Silmarillion where Glaurung could have told him what was going on.
But of course he's not going to.
Of course he's not, because he's going to mess with him until the very end. And it's in that final battle where, and I don't remember exactly where it is, Turin finally comes to it. He attacks Glaurung. He gets that fatal blow underneath him.
Oh, that's right. The blood of Glaurung falls on his arm, and he falls into a dark swoon and lays one dead. And then that's when Nienor, his sister, comes over, essentially, and Glaurung removes the spell from her.
Yes.
And then she all of a sudden remembers who she is, knows that she is Turin's sister.
Yep.
And is basically so distraught that she casts herself off a cliff.
Yeah, and she also thinks that Turin is dead, right? So she sees the mangled dragon body. She sees Turin,
like the man she loves, but is also her brother. So it's like twice.
He removes basically the spell from her memory, and she's just like, "What the?" Like it is horrific. Yeah, so she loses. Oh man, I can't. If you're ever going to read Children of Húrin, it's really, really dark.
It's sad. But this is the evilness of Glaurung, all this stuff, that she casts herself off the cliff. Turin does end up waking up and realizes what happens also. And he ends up stabbing himself with his own sword. So he
takes his own life. It's very, really dark Romeo and Juliet in a way. And it's like Glaurung, man, that's psychological punch at the end where he's like, I have the quote when he literally uses his last breath to mess with Nienor. And he says, "Then Glaurung stirred for the last time ere he died, and he spoke with his last breath, saying, 'Hail, Nienor, daughter of Húrin, we meet again ere the end. I give thee joy that thou hast found thy brother at last. And now thou shalt know him, a stabber in the dark, treacherous to foes, faithless to friends, and a curse unto his kin, Turin, son of Húrin. But the worst of all his deeds thou shalt feel in thyself.'" So he's like, oh, you finally found your brother. Guess who it is? And it's so awful.
Horrible.
So twisted. So full of malice.
That's just that whole story and seeing the evilness of Glaurung. I was like, he's kind of the worst.
He's pretty bad. He's pretty awful. I think
I'd rather be burned to death than go through all that psychological torture.
Yes. Yeah. Horrific. No good. But basically, that first time that Turin locks eyes with the dragon.
Yeah, he looks Glaurung in the eyes, so don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. And he even asked his blade to slay him. Turin asks his famous blade to kill him quickly.
Oh, yeah, and the blade talks to him back and is pretty much like, yeah, I will.
I got you, bro. We're going to end this right now.
Yeah, I got you.
Anyway,
yeah.
Anyway. Glaurung, ladies and gentlemen. And again, but this is all in the Silmarillion and the Children of Húrin. It's not Lord of the Rings. It's not...
No. Yeah, you got to go way back to the first age.
I think there might be like a passing reference to Smaug being a descendant of Glaurung at some point in The Hobbit. But
I think so. I mean,
there's no context.
They make it seem like Glaurung was... I mean, the father of dragons, so it makes it seem like every dragon is descended from him.
Yeah, he's pathological. He's malevolent.
Glad he died.
Very glad he died. Thank you, Turin, for your...
Yeah, poor guy.
Glaurung, first dragon.
First dragon.
Tolkien comes out swinging with that.
It's all smooth sailing from here.
It's all great. All the other dragons are not near... No, they're not great, but I don't think any of them are quite as evil.
Not as evil.
Glaurung. And I think Glaurung dies before the final War of Wrath, too, because...
Yeah.
Can you imagine if he had still been around as a weapon by the time the elves have their final showdown with Morgoth in the First Age?
Yeah, it would have been worse.
They're very lucky Morgoth lost that weapon thanks to
earlier.
Man.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a trend because, the second one we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Men are pretty good at taking down dragons. Like non-elves.
That's what I thought.
Elves are not good at taking down dragons. It's all the other races.
That's a good point, actually.
The dwarves and men and hobbits.
Yeah.
I mean, has a man taken down every major dragon in every story that Tolkien writes about them?
Actually, I think yes.
The only dragon deaths we know about.
As great as elves are at apparently fighting Morgoth in general, not the dragons.
0 for 3 against dragons based on the text.
Well, our next dragon, I went into this thinking that it was going to be my favorite dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And it is in terms of physical size.
In terms of descriptions, this guy is
like
pretty epic.
The beast of all dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Its name.
Ancalagon the Black.
Ancalagon.
The dragon that broke the world. That's what I like to say.
Yeah.
I'm making that up. But
actually
that's
it is. Yeah.
It is in a sense. Yeah. So we've established Glaurung as this psychologically terrifying dragon, but also, can't fly.
Yeah.
And now enter Ancalagon the Black, who's just on an apocalyptic scale, almost incomprehensibly big.
Well, yeah. So it is winged, so it can fly. It breathes fire hotter than any flame on Middle Earth besides...
the flames of Mordor?
Yeah, besides
Mount Doom.
Mount Doom, which Gandalf mentions later.
And it's interesting too, because he's called Ancalagon the Black. And he's given that kind of color and description that emphasizes kind of the evilness and the darkness. And he's got... Glaurung is a pretty scary name, but if I heard Ancalagon the Black, I'd be uh-oh. What are we... the name sounds very cataclysmic, if you will.
And I mean, he's not mentioned a ton.
No.
He
doesn't need to be. He makes his entrance.
He doesn't need to be, yeah. Here's the thing about Tolkien, and I guess some of this maybe wasn't fully hashed out. Christopher is probably the one that put this together, but it's only a short paragraph that he's really mentioned.
And it was probably bits and pieces of Tolkien's notes that his son discovered and kind of cobbled into this description. I mean, we don't know how much of it was Tolkien had this paragraph written or Christopher pieces it together when he's putting together the Silmarillion. But yeah, he gets a very brief mention. Now, it is impactful.
Absolutely. I'm this could be a whole movie in one paragraph. Obviously, you have to expand upon it, but...
So I remember Ancalagon in one of our previous episodes. It's his size that stands out.
Yes.
That is just so... we don't really get a lot on his personality.
No.
We don't get any dialogue with him, so we don't know if he has some of the mind control curse powers that Glaurung has, but...
It's just his size, which we get the impression of his size based on how he dies, essentially.
Yeah. That's basically where he's described in the books. And again, we don't know when exactly he was created. We don't know what he's been up to for most of the First Age. We do know that he's basically this secret weapon that Morgoth appears to be sitting on and releases.
Oh, yes, because this is where the elves are doing a pretty good job. They are finally taking care of all the orcs and look like they're going to win.
Yeah, it's the War of Wrath, the big battle at the end of the First Age that ends with the destruction of the continent and everything going on.
That's right.
And again, we don't know when Morgoth created him or how long, has he been told to be in timeout for a couple hundred years?
It does seem like he's been sitting on this dragon. He doesn't let him out this time.
He wants to wait till he really, really needs to use it. Morgoth does.
Yeah.
And we get this description where essentially the dragon is finally released in this epic battle at the end of the First Age. And it is said that Ancalagon's, when he's killed, his fall breaks the towers.
Which is a mountain range,
which is,
by the way.
3 mountain peaks.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. This isn't it just falls down on top of a fortress. The whole fortress was a mountain range.
Right.
And his fall breaks 3 mountain peaks.
It says, and he fell upon the towers of Thangorodrim, and they were broken in his ruin.
Yes.
Now, whether they were completely crushed or it's hard to say, but just the fact that they are mountain ranges and 3 separate peaks makes this dragon seem gigantic.
It's huge. Like, in the loosest interpretation, his body is so massive that he literally crushes 3 mountains, which, let's think about that for a second. In a more conservative reading, I think you could say that the force of the impact of his fall causes catastrophic destruction.
But still,
a dragon so big that it takes down 3 mountains, ladies and gentlemen. That is, like...
I would love to see this on screen.
It would be so cool. And our favorite, Eärendil, Elrond's dad, is who takes him down, with the help of the eagles, of course.
Does he have a Silmaril to help him as well?
I think he brings the Silmaril into the battle, right? But again, a human man, with some help from Manway's eagles, flies into the air and takes down a dragon that is the size of, a flying city? Like, huge.
Yeah, this is where I'd love to see it visualized. And I feel like to see this on the movie screen, you'd probably end up thinking, this battle is just, it's too much.
Yeah, it's too much. You can't even capture it.
But that's how it's written. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting to me because there's some really good images online that show the scale of dragons. And there's like a teeny tiny dot that is Smaug. And then you have Ancalagon, which is like taking up half the screen, right? It's just like, Smaug would be like his toe in comparison, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that from a pure physical sense, I feel like he's probably the most powerful creature, one of the most powerful creatures that Morgoth creates and Tolkien writes about, but he's not developed as a character.
He only lasts this one battle.
Yeah, he shows up and then he gets taken down by a dude and falls and crushes 3 mountains. So it's kind of very brief and very...
Maybe not
Well, because you can imagine the fear.
I'm sure it was very scary for a while.
A dragon that big come out of Morgoth's fortress, I'd be like, we are screwed.
Yeah.
And then the dude takes him out and he falls, which, again, we don't know if he took out any good guys in the process.
I'm sure it was a hard fight.
Yeah.
It definitely, since it's just a paragraph long, it's a whole battle with eagles and Eärendil, possibly with a Silmaril.
Well, and he also so this is the fight because Elrond's dad is back. He's already gone to the Undying Lands and pleaded their case to the Valar. So the Valar are in this fight. This isn't just like elves and men and dwarves. It is the gods from the other side of
They're like, okay, the universe. We're coming over.
Like, all right, we got to put Morgoth in his place. So it is Morgoth's desperation at the assault, not only by the elves and dwarves and stuff, but because the Valar are there that causes him, he finally releases, like, the pits of Angband are emptied. I'm issuing out all these dragons that had never before been seen. And before Ancalagon is taken down, it is said, when Morgoth releases all of these new dragons, including Ancalagon, it was so sudden and ruinous was the onset of the dreadful fleet of dragons that the host of the Valar were driven back. So there's that initial like, oh crap, this is really bad before Elrond's dad Eärendil finally slays him, which is crazy. But it looks pretty like Ancalagon was meant to turn the tide, and he clearly does for a brief moment before he's finally taken down. But yeah, on a scale of terrifying to... terrifying. Like I cannot.
I do love Ancalagon just for its size.
Yeah,
he's kind of the most badass dragon.
No, he's take that, George R.R. Martin. My problem is, and I think I told you this. There's an old shampoo called Calgon, and the commercials used to be like, "Calgon, take me away" or whatever. And every time I hear Ancalagon say, I'm like, "Ancalagon, take me away." Which, not that a dragon needs, a little jingle, but.
Too bad Ancalagon doesn't have hair of any sort, just scales.
It's like a shampoo commercial.
Yes,
he,
exactly.
Flips his luxurious.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yes. I wish we'd gotten more on him. I like to imagine there's a pile of Tolkien's notes somewhere where like there's a whole story arc and plot about Ancalagon. And
that'd be awesome.
And I get it. If Morgoth is keeping him in reserve until the end, he wouldn't have been like out and about wrecking. But man, he could have done some damage.
I am definitely ready for this adaptation. Hopefully sometime in my lifetime.
Give me the Ancalagon fan fictions. I mean, can you imagine if he had actually beaten... The fact that he's able to like knock back the Valar for a bit. That's pretty...
Powerful dragon.
Pretty powerful dragon. Indeed.
Kind of glad he only lasted for one battle.
Yes. I think it says a lot that thankfully all these really, really terrifying dragons are all taken out in the first age for the most part. Like they exist, they continue on into later ages, but there's nothing on the scale of Ancalagon or the power of Glaurung that thankfully makes it through, because I feel like elves and men and dwarves wouldn't have made it.
So those are the really baddie dragons. And for the rest of the episode, we're going to mention the lesser known.
The lesser dragons.
Not necessarily lesser known, but
lesser in the sense that, they're less powerful.
Right.
By orders of magnitude. Smaug and the lesser dragons. Smaug. I should do my Benedict Cumberbatch voice, but I can't. But yes, Smaug and the lesser dragons.
Yeah.
All right. We've talked about Glaurung, who's psychologically terrifying and evil. We've talked about Ancalagon, who's like the mountain-sized apocalypse dragon. And now we come to the dragon that most of us...
If you've seen the Hobbits, I mean, he's still a badass dragon. He destroys towns,
He destroyed all of Dale.
Yeah.
Kicked the dwarves out of the Lonely Mountain. Like, he's not powerful.
Yeah.
Smaug the Golden. But here's the thing, is what's interesting. By the standards we've just established, Smaug, I never say it right. Smaug is almost small.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of laughingly small. If you were to, like I said, put him up next to a picture of Ancalagon, he's the size of his, like, toe?
Yeah.
Foot? Like, it's not... It's not...
That's insane, by the way.
Yeah, and he's
the classic dragon.
He's much more of a classic dragon. I mean, yes, he destroys an entire kingdom of men up in the north and kicks all the dwarves out of their kingdom of Erebor, but he's sort of the last of these great fire drakes that we know about. Like, they may be out in the world, and I think Tolkien says in his writing that dragons still exist.
Yeah, I was going to mention that later when it came to the question of... But yeah, he's the last real known dragon that's talked about, at least in the Third Age.
And he's got so many great names. We have Smaug the Golden, Smaug the Magnificent, Smaug the Terrible.
Yeah.
And he's not quite golden color. He's like red golden almost, right?
Yeah. And isn't he covered in, like, he's sat over this hoard of gold for so long that the gold is like embedded, or the jewels, I guess, or just the treasure has embedded itself into his body. So he's kind of covered in, encrusted.
Right. So, taking a step back. So Smaug is in the Third Age. And basically, we have the dwarves under the mountain, Thror, and they've made Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, into one of the richest dwarven kingdoms remaining in Middle-earth. I mean, halls upon halls of gold, gems, the Arkenstone, everything, right? Like, if you've seen the movie The Hobbit, it's like giant, massive hallways just filled to the brim with golden treasure. Just perfect dragon bait. Like, it is.
Oh, yeah, because dragons are, like, attracted to treasure and gold.
A dragon, you got some gold there.
Yeah.
So Smaug attacks the Lonely Mountain. And it's interesting, right? Like, he's acting independently as far as we know.
Yeah, it kind of is like, hey, here you got some nice gold there.
Yeah. Here you got some gold. I want that for me. You made this, I made this.
Yeah.
As far as we know, he's not attacking the mountain at Sauron's behest. He's doing it because he wants the shiny things, right? Yeah. And he's powerful enough to take it. But then he just kind of hangs out for a couple, like 100-something years and becomes one with the treasure.
He comes out every now and then to, like, take a person from Dale. But otherwise, pretty much just sits on the treasure.
Yeah.
For like 170 years or something.
And I think Tolkien says, like, undoubtedly the treasure of Erebor was what brought him. Like, dragons steal gold and jewels. They love it. They want to be there. They can't really make things for themselves, but, like, they like the idea of having this hoard of treasure. But he's terrifying, right? Like, when Bilbo, the Hobbit, first encounters him, it says in the book that to say that Bilbo's breath was taken away is no description at all. There are no words left to express his staggerment, since men changed the language that they learned of elves in the days when the world was wonderful. Like, Bilbo literally doesn't have a word to describe how terrified he is upon seeing Smaug. And I want to be like, bro, let's talk about those first... You don't even know. Those first stage dragons would literally...
But yeah, he's still a big, scary dragon.
Yeah, and he has the ability of speech, which is really cool because you
he's
get this
pretty cunning for a dragon.
He is very smart.
Maybe not as evil as Glaurung, as far as greedy for sure, and just cunning.
Yes. And I like how he's very full of himself, like the way he describes himself. There's Benedict Cumberbatch, again, in the movie The Hobbit, does such a good job of the voice acting. But he's like, my armor is like tenfold shields. My teeth are like swords. My claws, spears. The shock of my tail, a thunderbolt. My wings, a hurricane. And my breath, death.
Yeah.
Which, maybe he's puffing himself up a little bit.
Thinking a little bit much of yourself there, Smaug.
Well, as far as he knows, he's the big bad. He took over Erebor and he's doing his thing. So
he's doing pretty good for himself, yeah.
But again, this seems to be a trend, is taken down by a man.
Yep.
Not an elf, not a dwarf.
Man of Dale.
A man of Dale. takes him down with one shot to the one little chink in his armor.
Right?
Bard the bowman.
Yep.
This is all in The Hobbit, so feel free to read the books and see the movie. But yeah, there's basically Smaug was in a fight when he took down the city of Dale 170 years ago, and there was an archer, a man who almost took him out, and was able to basically knock off a scale.
Yeah, was it a scale he knocked off, or like a jewel that was encrusted?
There's basically one vulnerable point left in Smaug, and Bard the bowman is able to hit it like a true badass.
And I think like Bilbo saw it when he was talking to Smaug. And then I think a thrush, like a bird, overheard Bilbo talking about it.
Yes.
And then came over to Bard.
I was like, hey, buddy,
like, psst, psst, psst.
that's hot news for you. Well, it's really interesting, right? Because in the movies, I think Bilbo tells him.
Yeah.
But in the books, it's just a little animal who's like on the side of good, who's like, hey, you probably want to know this.
Yeah.
The dragon can be hurt.
Thank you, thrush.
Thank you, tiny bird. Also, how is this bird speaking? Is it a real bird? Is it a bird of Manway?
Great questions, because I know Gandalf can kind of talk to
animals. But it's not like you're going through the world and animals randomly speak to you, even in Middle-earth.
True. I feel like there's another example that I just can't think of at this moment, that it maybe was mentioned in the books. It kind of gives you the idea that this happens occasionally.
Well, then
don't quote me on that.
I'm going to put my vote in for divine Valar intervention, where maybe this bird is like part of the manway. Maybe he's like he really wants to be a giant eagle and he can't be, but he's like, I'm going to do my part.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would benefit everybody in that area, including the animals, to get rid of Smaug.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so we've got Smaug the Magnificent, who, again, he's got some decent plot. We get dialogue. We get a sense of how he is as a dragon, but he's nowhere near the scale of his ancestors. But he's not the only dragon that's still around, maybe?
Well, there is another dragon that gets enough mention, still very little, that has a name called Scatha.
Scatha. I don't know about Scatha. Tell me about Scatha.
So this is a cool one in that it's also wingless, and it's called a cold drake instead of a fire drake.
Is it like an ice dragon, or?
Well, so it's not completely said. It's either that it's a lack of fire, but there is a poem that Tolkien wrote that I think they're kind of newly released, so I still need to check them out. Let me read it.
Oh, please. Hit me with your best poetry.
So, this is what Tolkien says. Some have great wings like the wind. Some have fire and fierce wrath. Some have venom on their long teeth. Some have hides like armor, tails like steel, tongues like spears, eyes piercing bright. Some are great and golden, some are green, some are red as glowing irons. Not so with Scatha. He was gray, he was cold, he was silent, and he was blind. He crawled like a slow, creeping death, too horrible to flee from, froze men with fear and his icy breath, and then crushed them, ground them under his long white belly.
That's weird and terrifying all right.
Yeah, so he kind of has sounds like you also don't want to look him in the eyes because he can freeze you with fear.
But he's blind, so
he can't necessarily see you.
Interesting.
Yeah, too horrible to flee from. So he basically can freeze you with fear and then maybe freeze you with his breath and then basically like crush you with his belly and grind you into dust.
That's a horrible way to go.
Yeah, pretty terrifying.
His description reminds me, and I think this is very Tolkien, right? Because we know Tolkien was a scholar of like ancient Germanic and Norse and old mythology. This sounds like a lot of the dragons from Norse mythology, which are like these great worms, if you will. And they don't necessarily fly. They like hang out in their caves and they're big and they're terrifying.
Yeah.
But they're more like giant, like Komodo dragons or lizards. They're not like flying winged dragons. Like
it does seem like Scatha lives up in the Grey Mountains in the north.
Okay, like so he's in Grey Mountains.
Yeah. That would kind of make sense if he lives in caves that he's blind. Like maybe he doesn't need to see. So
when is Scatha like alive? Is it the Third Age?
Yeah. So I was going to say it's mentioned in the Appendix A of the end of Lord of the Rings. It's just another paragraph, so it's not a whole lot to go off of, but I'll read this as well. He's up in the Grey Mountains, and there's the predecessors of the men of Rohan.
Oh, the Eothed.
Yes,
right?
the Eothed.
Oh.
So it's one of them that actually kills Scatha.
Another man takes down a dragon.
It is another man, yeah.
Tolkien is very on the nose with this. So every dragon dies by the hand of a man, as far as we know. I guess Arendelle is half man, but still.
But yeah. So this man is named Fram.
Ooh,
and
Fram the man.
Fram, they tell that he slew Scatha, the great dragon of arid Mithrin, and the land had peace from the long worms afterwards. Thus, Fram won great wealth, but was at feud with the dwarves who claimed the hoard of Scatha.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Fram would not yield them a penny and sent them instead the teeth of Scatha, made into a necklace, saying, "Jewels such as these you will not match in your treasuries, for they are hard to come by." Some say that the dwarves slew Fram for this insult.
That's such I love the middle finger to the dwarves a little bit, but so he's basically saying, you couldn't kill the dragon, I did, so I get the loot.
Yeah.
Here are his teeth.
I think
That's
Fram
more
had
than
the
you
dragon
managed.
sickness as well.
Oh, interesting. But I thought it can't affect men. Maybe the dwarves had the dragon sickness because they wanted his hoard.
But it makes it so here's some of the research that I was doing on all this, because this is why I feel so bad for the dwarves. So the dwarves awake the Balrog in Khazad Dûm.
Yep.
They flee from there, and the majority of them go to the Grey Mountains.
Right.
A subset go to Erebor, the Lonely Mountain.
And the Blue Mountains, they still got some stuff.
Yeah, and I guess another place. But the people that went to the Lonely Mountain, Erebor, did actually go back to the Grey Mountains to be with all of their kin. And so I think that is the point where actually a bunch of dragons came, potentially mostly Scatha, but I think that there were a couple dragons. They flew again from the Grey Mountains back to Erebor.
Oh, the dwarves fled again after the dragons took over.
So they fled back to Erebor. And then that's when Smaug comes in later.
So, like, Smaug and buddies did some sort of let's really mess with the dwarves.
Yeah, so Smaug was not the first time that they were attacked by dragons.
Well, but if they keep amassing these hoards of treasures that attract dragons,
maybe you shouldn't do that.
Maybe diversify your holdings a bit.
So it makes it sound like it was the dwarves' treasure
that also drew Scatha and the other dragons.
Yeah, and so it was the dwarves' treasure, not Fram's. But Fram was like, well, I killed the dragon, so it's mine. Yeah.
I wonder, do we know if... So Fram the man, killer of Scatha, so he sends this dragon tooth necklace to the dwarves, being like, well, this is more than you could have gotten, haha. And then they kill him. Is that why the Rohirrim are so hostile towards dwarves? Because they're not really friendly towards Gimli in Lord of the Rings when Gimli shows up. And I'm like, maybe there's some history there. There's some historical angst between...
I can't answer that because I don't know enough of the history, but we'll have to look into that for another future episode, I think.
What's the deal between dwarves not getting along with everybody?
They don't have a good rap. So even though they kind of get the short end of the stick when it comes to dragons and Balrogs, they're not very well liked around Middle-earth.
I like the pattern is dragons steal treasure, almost always from the dwarves. A man kills the dragon. And at some point, dispute opens up or arises over the ownership of said treasure. Because think about everything that happens with Erebor, that doesn't end well for Thorin. Sounds like the dwarves killed Fram. So don't touch the dragon treasure.
Lesson of the day: don't
touch dragon treasure, and don't actually try to fight them unless you're a man, because it seems like nobody else can actually take them down.
Definitely not if you're an elf, because I don't think they fare very well against dragons.
But it's almost, I will say, when you get to the age of Scatha, so Scatha is the second age or the third age?
I believe it's the third age.
Okay. Well, if the Aothed are around that feels like the third age.
Yeah. Yes, it's the third age.
It does still seem like it's just not on the scale of the first age dragons. There's these smaller dragons.
It doesn't have fire. It doesn't have wings.
They're not taking down whole elven cities. They're a menace, and they're taking over, these treasure hoards, but they're not taking out whole mountain chains, if you will.
Right.
So it's almost like
he gets a mention in the appendix, but it's not a huge dragon.
I wonder, do we know if these dragons, so the Grey Mountains are north of Mirkwood. Do we know if these dragons ever bothered the elves of Mirkwood and Legolas and his dad at any point in time?
Not that I can think of. They seem to like mountains.
Yeah. Well, if that's where dwarves are,
that's where all the treasure
digging
is,
and finding treasure, it kind of the pattern repeats. But that's
so don't hoard treasure.
I wonder what Tolkien was saying about why men are only able to kill dragons. It's never explained, but it's very clearly we have 4 examples, the only known examples in the text of dragons.
That's funny.
Are all killed by men and no one else. What it is about men that makes them able to take down dragons?
Question for a future.
I know.
I'm going to have to research that.
I want to research it too. I hadn't really, until we started talking about it, I hadn't really put it together. But I was like, there's no one kills dragons except for men.
Interesting. So, the question, are there still dragons in Middle-earth?
Yeah, hit me. What do they got?
According to Tolkien, the answer is yes.
Ooh, even into the 4th age?
I believe so.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
Here's what Tolkien said in one of his letters.
Where are they at? Where are they hiding? I want to know.
So he says in a letter, dragons, they have not stopped. since they were active in far later times, close to our own. Have I said anything to suggest the final ending of dragons? If so, it should be altered. And then he goes on to say, the only passage I can think of is Volume 1, page 70. And this is where Gandalf says, but there is not now any dragon left on earth in which the old fire is hot enough, except for Ancalagon the Black, which he talks about a little bit, who could have harmed the One Ring. And so just the way he says, there is not now any dragon left on earth in which the old fire is hot enough, kind of implies that there are dragons still, just not with the fire hot enough to melt the ring.
And does he really think Ancalagon could have melted the One Ring?
No. Oh. So the full quote that Gandalf is saying is like, and even Ancalagon could not have melted the One Ring, but that old fire of Ancalagon could have melted other rings. And he's basically saying, like, there's no dragon left on Earth in which the old fire is hot enough.
Thank goodness for the current races of Middle-earth. Like,
but it basically implies that there are still dragons.
I wonder where they're hiding out. If it's like a Balrog situation where you just stumble across it, or are there just like little pockets of like maybe dwarf wealth and other things left over from the First and Second Age that they've
maybe
just been hanging out with?
It does seem like a lot of these dragons hang out in those North Mountains.
People go up there for funsies.
Yeah, so maybe they're just kind of hanging out up there and mostly live by themselves until there's a horde big enough to kind of lure them down.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, honestly, this episode has left me with more questions, which is great because I want to know.
This is why we do this.
This is why we do this, right? Like we joked, we're like, dragons? Well, we're going to talk about dragons. And
there's only like a few dragons, right?
There's so much to talk about. But now like all these little threads that we're pulling about like, why is it only men? And where are the remaining dragons? And, you know, how are they actually made? I want to see what
we got to do more research into where they come from.
Yeah, I want to see what like Tom Shipley and some of the other Tolkien scholars have to say about that too, because I'm sure somebody's written something on it. But
we can expand in a future part 2.
I don't know. I wanted to do a little shout out at the end, which is essentially like not only are Tolkien's dragons incredible and fascinating and terrifying, but essentially like they're sort of the blueprint for how we think about modern dragons in fantasy. Like Tolkien, you know, he was, like I said, an academic. He studied Norse mythology and Beowulf and all these old things. And he's done translations of them and read them in the original Old English. And he's done the Poetic Edda and all these things. And he very much stood on the shoulders of giants by adapting these sort of Norse and Anglo-Saxon ideas about dragons. But what's cool for me is Tolkien didn't invent talking dragons, but he sort of made these talking evil manipulative dragons the default. Because you get little bits and pieces, but there's not really like Beowulf's dragon doesn't really talk. For those of you that are familiar with Norse mythology, there's the Volsunga saga. And there's a story in that's Sigurdun Fafnir. And that dragon feels more like Scatha, right? Like he's like this giant worm. And ironically, he's taken over a dwarven horde. And then a man kills him, and the man claims the treasure, and the dwarves are not
Sounds
happy
very familiar.
About it. Sounds very familiar, right? And that dragon speaks like briefly, but he just kind of like throws out a few curses. He's not like having full conversations.
Intelligence, yeah.
You know, for those of you who are familiar with the legend of St. George and the dragon, like that's just a beast, right? St. George kills the dragon. We don't even know if it had a personality. It's funny because you get these bits and pieces, and in Tolkien's works, dragons are evil. There's like, as far as we know, there's no
friendly
dragon.
Ones.
No, there's
not
no like
How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah,
style.
There's no like dragons as pets, or dragons are just misunderstood. Like none of that. They're evil.
Straight evil, kill it.
Killed
if you can.
Created by Morgoth, kill it now. And I think that's so interesting because he creates these dragons that are like smart and can like use language as a weapon. And I think that's so common in later fantasy when we see dragons. It's even in Game of Thrones, they're weapons, but they're like basically dangerous pets that are bonded with their people.
If you can ride them and
hang out with them.
Yeah, nobody's riding any Middle-earth dragons.
No. And even like there's a. Can
you imagine riding in Ancalagon though? Like you'd be a little speck.
You wouldn't even be able to.
You wouldn't even know. He wouldn't know you're.
You wouldn't be able to see anything because he's so big. You just like see an expanse of like giant black dragon around you. You can't see the countryside or the clouds but yeah, like I really love that Tolkien's idea of dragons for the most part has basically set the tone for the next 70 years in terms of how we think about dragons and their powers and all these other things that we wouldn't have had without Tolkien. So any closing thoughts from the audience here?
I still really want to see Ancalagon on screen.
Yeah.
He's still probably my favorite just in terms of massive scale.
See your absolute favorite?
I think so.
Yeah.
Even though I do think Glaurung is just so evil. Like,
Glaurung is, I don't want to go up against any of them. Glaurung, I feel like, would be the scariest for sure. Like, you can't.
Yeah.
Once he, like, the fact that as soon as he speaks to you, it's kind of like when Saruman uses the book. Like, as soon as he speaks to you, you're done for.
Yeah. It's like you don't even know what you're going to do because now you're under a spell.
Yeah.
It's like you're not even yourself anymore.
What's your defense against that? Nothing.
Yeah.
It's like in Greek mythology when what's his name fights Medusa, right? He has to like cover his eyes and like stuff his ears and like try to
use a mirror to look around.
I don't know. Like for me, okay, personally, my favorite is always going to be Smaug.
Nice,
because he's so sassy.
Yeah.
Like, is he as scary as the other one? Absolutely not. Like, I would also love to see Ancalagon the Black on screen because that would be insane. But like in terms of just look at me, the words,
that's a good point.
Banter, and I love that a little hobbit is having this like war of words and flattering a dragon.
And Smaug is enjoying it, kind of like
he loves it.
Yeah,
he's like, flattery will get you everywhere, my hobbit. Like it's so good.
Yeah,
and he was the first Tolkien dragon that I encountered. He's always going to have a soft spot in my heart. I actually had read some of the Norse mythology and like Sigurd and the Fafnir and all these things before I read Tolkien. So I had this idea of dragons in my head. And then I read Smaug and I was like, ooh.
I like
this guy.
Yeah.
He's got personality. So,
I like it.
Yeah, so Smaug's definitely my favorite.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that brings us to our call to adventure. So if you enjoyed wandering with us today, please subscribe to Beyond the Brandywine on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can also find us on YouTube at Beyond the Brandywine. We'll be putting up visual tangents to accompany some of the podcasts, as well as recordings of the podcasts themselves.
For even more Middle-earth musings, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Beyond the Brandywine.
Plus, find all of our links and more at beyondthebrandywine.com.
We would love to hear your thoughts on Tolkien's dragons. Are you Team Glaurung or Ancalagon, or maybe a classic Smaug girly like me? What do you think was Tolkien's impact on dragons in modern fantasy? We love all of your thoughts. So please feel free to reach out to us on the socials or email us at hello@beyondthebrandywine.com.
What was that again?
hello@beyondthebrandywine.com.
All right, everyone. So until next time, if you happen to come across a dragon, do not look it in the eye.
And remember, don't be afraid to wander beyond the Brandywine.
Oh my god, dragons. Oh my god, dragons.
I can't imagine if that was the dwarven response. Like, they're just like, oh my god, dragons.
Dragons again.
Maybe you can't really move your mouth much in the masks of the Nalgrim. Oh my god, dragons.
Oh my god, dragons.
At least they're prepared.
Yeah.
They're prepared.
Yeah, you can't talk through the mask, so that's what it sounds like. I'd rather be protected than be able to talk clearly.
Yeah.
If I was a dwarf.
Agreed.